So now we got started creating this expense class and we're almost done, but there's actually one piece of information missing that should also belong to expense objects. And that's the category to which an expense belongs. Because in this finished app which we're building, every expense has a category attached to it, which is important for that chart that will be built. Because that chart groups expenses by category. So therefore here I also want to store some category information in my expense class. And you could now of course say that you want to have a category property which is of type string. This would allow us to add categories as string values to these expenses as we create them. But this could be quite error prone. Because if we, for example, want to support the category leisure, like this, we could of course create such an expense object by calling expense and passing leisure like this as a category value, but it could happen that we accidentally introduce a typo here and we wouldn't get any warning or error when doing so because any kind of string value is accepted. So even though that might not be one of the categories we want to support in this app, we wouldn't get an error because it is a valid string. It just wouldn't show up in our chart because there we might not look for this category because it contains a typo. So for that reason, using a string here is not optimal. It's too flexible. It allows too many values. Instead, we want to create a fixed set of allowed values so that we have to use one of those values when creating a new expense. And for that, we can create a new value that contains all these allowed values with another special Dart feature, the enum feature, the enum keyword. Enum is a keyword that allows us to create a custom type, you could say, that could be named category here, which simply is a combination of predefined allowed values. You define those allowed values between opening and closing curly braces. So this simply is the enum syntax in Dart. And then here between those opening and closing curly braces, you list your enum values. For example, here for the expense categories that we want to support, in this app here, I want to have food, travel, leisure, and work. And of course, you could add more, though these will be the categories I will later output in my chart. So with that, we're simply saying that in this project, in this Dart project, in this app here, we want to have a custom type category that supports these possible values. Please note that these values are not wrapped in quotes, so we don't have string values here technically, but nonetheless, this entire syntax here is recognized by Dart and treats these values kind of like string values. You will see how we can access them as text later on in this section. But now with that, we can use category as a custom type here for this category value in our expense class. And now, of course, we also want to accept categories as input values. And for this here, I will also accept a category parameter, a named category parameter, which is required. And that's now the finished expense model for the moment. We'll fine-tune and change it a little bit later, but that's the model for the moment. And with that model defined, we can now switch back to the UI and make sure that we use that model there and, for example, output a list of expenses.